4, 3, 2, 1. CTS podcast, episode 60. 60 episodes.
Really?
Yeah, pretty crazy.
It's going to take us a while to get to 100. I think we may have to fast track it a little bit because with the way that we're going, I think it's probably taken us about 6 months for the last 10 episodes.
What if, if we get back on the schedule that we should be on, I'm sorry, guys, it's all Jace's fault. I'm sorry. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to bring conflict into this podcast, but it is completely Jace's fault. No, I think we'll be good. We'll make sure to stay on track.
Well, you got to figure 40 more episodes, even if we did them once a week, is another 40 weeks.
Yeah.
So we'll be not late, but we'll be at the beginning of 2023.
Yeah.
Dude, by that time, we'll have seen the new season of The Mandalorian.
This is the politics.
Oh.
This is the politics.
Okay,
one.
But still, they can know. We'll have seen all these cool new shows.
Of stuff. New shows, movies.
And
a lot of
we'll have
stuff
seen
will have
the
happened.
midterms.
Yes.
So 558.
Good
I think is their
segue.
name. 548, something like that. They're a pretty reputable polling site for politics.
Oh, what? It's a...
What is it? I can't remember. It's like 443. It's something with numbers.
Is it 548?
That might be it. I don't know. Anyways, they came out and said Republicans, I think, had an 88% chance of winning the House in 88 of 100 scenarios. So we're going to see a Republican-controlled House, and the Senate is up for – it's kind of like a wash. No one really knows how it's going to go.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
So here's the problem I had this week, okay?
Okay.
You see, there's all these people that were really upset, rightfully so, about January 6th. I thought and I actually think I thought it was worse than you thought, I think, from what we've spoken. I thought it was really, really bad. I think you were more like, it was bad, but it wasn't to the extent that some people were saying it was. I think it pretty much was to that extent.
I think I was saying, I don't know if you impeach Trump for it. I think that was my angle, is that I don't know how much culpability on the severity of it you can have for Trump. But regardless.
Yeah, so going on, you see all these protests around over Roe v. Wade.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting into state capitol buildings, and it's like there's not the type of narrative being built around this from the left, And to be fair, the right didn't build. They built a narrative over January 6th, but it was the complete opposite of what the left was saying.
Yeah.
It's just, I think it highlights how hypocritical it all is. It's like, you could have people from the left side of politics just completely demolishing the Capitol, and it would be a completely different narrative.
Well, and the thing is it's also weird. It feels like it's happened quite a few times in the last little bit that you get something happens and there's probably the appropriate response to January 6th, or at the very least, kind of generally the right attitude around it from kind of mainstream, at least on the left. And then, not that long later, we kind of have events that make them have to kind of not walk it back, but you'd think if you wanted any sort of consistency on your messaging that it would be similar events that are not getting similar coverage, similar reactions, and it's it's kind of funny.
Did you hear about the riots in Ohio today at all? Did you hear about this?
A little bit.
So there's a black guy that was being pulled over, and he ran, and a bullet came from his car. So a shot came from his car.
Yeah.
There's still no really known narrative over whether it was at police or whether it was an accidental misfire or what happened, but he ran. They caught up to him. He got out of the car. He's running away. They're telling him to stop. There's about 10 or so cops there, and they fired, I think, over 80 or over 100 bullets with 60 of them connecting. So they shot the guy 60 times.
Yeah.
I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
In what way?
just what do you think of it? I mean, because my initial reaction is like, I have two different ways of thinking about it. I think if you're going to make the argument that a shooting was not justified, that's a completely different argument than saying they shot him too many times. Because the problem isn't them shooting him too many times. The problem is them shooting him at all if it's an unjustified shooting, right? That's what the issue is. It's not whether they fired 80 bullets or 150 bullets. Your argument should be, should they have shot at all?
Yeah.
And if they shouldn't have shot at all, it goes to the other route. Because, I mean, cops shoot to kill. I mean, it's pretty well known that I think when they shoot, they're not shooting to incapacitate someone. They're shooting to kill them.
Yeah. Well, and have you seen, and like I've seen, and we can start on that one because I think it's the easier of the two questions to discuss. But like, I've seen a lot of Kende coverage of, oh my gosh, like they shot 80 times or whatever. Have you seen that video of that dude that's like, the dude with like he's like crazy. He's like tweaking on something.
Yeah, he's got like a wooden, it's not even like an axe. It's like a
holding
wooden something.
And he's running at that cop. And the cop shoots him probably 15 times.
Just
and from close range.
And nothing.
And he doesn't go down at all. So that's where stuff like that is where I'm like, I don't think the argument should really ever be like, was it excessive after the fact? I think once you get past the question of, was it justified? Then at that point, it's like just about anything. If you're going for lethal force, I'm never going to make the argument of, oh man, like they only should have shot 6 times instead of 10 or whatever. But I do think it's a much more nuanced question on the point of, is it justified?
That's my thing. I do think there is some argument to be had because the body cam video got released, and to be fair, they bring the guy down, like the guy's just laying on the ground, and they just keep just boom, 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 boom. I mean, it goes on for like 10 more seconds. And these cops just, like they were literally mag dumping. Like cops were reloading.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's definitely weird, but the bigger issue here is not necessarily whether that should have happened, because even if it was overkill, I think it's weird, but it's still not as bad as if it's an unjustified shooting, right? So that's the big deal. I'll give it to you from both sides. So on one hand, this is a much more nuanced case than, say, like I think it was Trayvon Martin that was just straight up murdered by those 3 white guys.
No, Trayvon Martin was.
No, Trayvon Martin's way back.
A long time ago.
Not Trayvon Martin.
I think that was like 2016. Oh man,
I can't remember. You know the case I'm talking
yeah.
about. Or for example,
where the 3 guys, they just very recently got charged with hate crimes and murder and whatever.
So this is different than, or even Breonna Taylor, which in my opinion was an unjustified killing. I think this case is a little bit more nuanced than those cases because from the cops' perspective, they have to assume this guy still has a gun. They have to. They're chasing him. They heard a shot come from the car. It's been pretty much verified that a shot came from this vehicle that he was in, and they're chasing the guy. What I don't quite understand is if I'm a cop and he's just running and he's not looking at me, I'm not going to shoot him, right? If I'm a cop and I'm running after someone, I would have my gun in my hand, but I'm not going to shoot him unless he turns around, because unless I just can't see his hands clearly, right? And that's the same thing that they have in a lot of states that aren't stand your ground states. If you have like a burglar entering your home and he's running away, you can't just shoot him as he's walking out the door.
Even if he's in your home, even if he has your stuff.
Yes, you can't shoot him as he's like running away. So I think that's sort of the argument that they're having here is this guy's running away. But on the other side, to give the other point of view, if I'm a cop and I can't see this guy's hands clearly, and I know that he had a gun or was in the vicinity of a gun, and he's running away, as soon as if I can't see what he's doing, I'm going to be nervous, like, what should I do now, right? Because he's too far away for your taser. He's too far away for any other, justifiable uses of force. So your only option is your gun. But I still think there's room in there to be upset about it, because if he's running away, I don't necessarily see why we're shooting. That's what I'm confused about.
So Yeah, I agree, but also I would maybe say, didn't we just kind of have the discussion in like Uvalde with the school shooting where it's um like part of the cops' duty isn't just to protect themselves, it's to protect other people.
Yeah.
So there's a little I think I could see a little bit of, hey, this dude we're pretty sure has a gun. He has shot, like there has been like a shot fired from the vehicle he was in, and I'm assuming he was the only one in the vehicle.
I don't know the answer to that yet.
I would guess, just in the sense that like you'd think, and maybe we could look for it, but it's just, and then you're like, okay, this guy has a gun. The thinking's this guy has a gun. He's running. He's already shown he's willing to like fire a gun at other people.
Yeah.
It's like kind of a weird place to be in where he's running away. So it's like, okay, well, if he doesn't have a gun or a weapon or whatever, he's not a danger to anybody and we should be able to deal with this. But also what happens, like he does have a gun.
Right. And he was unarmed. But the problem, this is another issue I have with that whole argument of, well, he was unarmed. It's, you can't look at it after the fact.
But he
right?
wasn't unarmed initially.
Right. And not even that, but you can't say, that is a big piece of it. I shouldn't say not only that, but you can't say after the fact that he wasn't armed. Why did they shoot him? Because the cops don't know that, right? And I don't want to sit here and be a cop bootlicker, but certainly from their perspective, if I was in their shoes, it'd be a really tough call. Like I said, if I'm a cop and I'm chasing after someone, I probably don't shoot. I probably don't shoot there until I see, okay, this guy, I know for sure that he has a gun, and I know for sure that I'm going to get hurt if I don't shoot.
Well, and I think the point isn't that cops should always assume somebody has a weapon. It's that they did see that he had a weapon, right?
They could reasonably assume that he had a weapon.
Well,
yes.
That feels reasonable to me. If you're like, this guy runs away from a traffic stop and then a shot gets fired out of his vehicle, regardless, I mean, I don't know how there's a misfire that I don't know. I just think that in this case, it seems like there was a little bit more of a reason to assume he had a weapon than it seems like in a lot of cases.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that. There was definitely more room here to assume that he had a weapon. And that's the weird thing I don't understand, is because it seems like some of these cases where, in my opinion, I'm like, wow, that's really, really bad from the cops, don't get nearly the kind of attention that some of these other cases
that are a little borderline.
Yeah, for example, the Uvalde stuff. I mean, there's been protests, but the city of Akron declared a state of emergency. I mean, what the cops did in Uvalde is, I mean, in my opinion, it's way, way worse. They sat outside that classroom with riot gear and refused to enter the classroom for 30 minutes and then refused to cooperate with the investigation. The Department of Public Safety head guy comes out and says this was a complete failure on the part of the police. Mm-hmm. The chief of the police is giving interviews and saying we're fully cooperating, and then you have the public investigator's office saying no, you're not.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just disgusting. So if you want to have riots over that.
And I mean, why do you think that is? Do you think it's because in clear-cut cases, typically the outcome is the right one? Like if it's a super clear-cut case, it's like this person gets charged or they get like fired. Like I wonder why, because I kind of agree that it seems like there's definitely clear-cut cases where it's like that's awful from the cops, from whatever, and then it does seem like you don't hear as much about some of those kind of open and shut cases.
Yeah, it's, I don't know why. It's weird because certainly the Uvalde stuff is a different situation than I think what falls into this narrative. Not even, I shouldn't call it a narrative because it's not really a narrative. It's just kind of true at this point of just black guys getting shot by police. So this case falls into that category, which got a bunch of public attention, and Uvalde is more of a unique situation. But in the Uvalde case, I'm much more sympathetic to holding mass protests than I am. I mean, I'm not even really. Not that I'm not sympathetic to holding protests in this case with the stuff that happened in Ohio, but I guess to me it's two different scenarios. And the Uvalde stuff seemed more clear cut to me, that there was a complete failure on the part of the police, and then they refused to take accountability for it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with the Ohio stuff, there's 8 officers that are on leave right now while it's
Yeah.
being investigated. With the stuff that's happening in Texas right now, with the Uvalde stuff, I mean, in my opinion, those officers should be charged, or at least the chief of police, whoever's the sergeant, lieutenant, whoever's directing these cops to just stand at the doorway while
Or
these
at the
children
very-
get slaughtered.
Or at the very least, like, if not charged, like, at least put on leave. Like, the bare minimum is put on
Yeah,
leave and
right.
aren't. So, yeah. No, but that's, I don't know. It's always tricky. And it's interesting to see what kind of gets highlighted when stuff like this happens, and what
Right.
kind of, because it's hard, because it seems like stuff's so polarized that there's no middle ground of like, hey, there's things that there's things to fix here. There's things we should change in the future about the situation. There's also things in this situation that, hey, maybe we need to look at, like, was this, yeah, it's just hard. It's, it doesn't seem like there's a middle ground on a lot of these issues, when it seems like it's a much more nuanced discussion than is being had kind of in the public domain.
Here's something interesting for you. Going back to what we talked about last week, as far as who's going to run for president.
Mm-hmm.
Newsom, for the 4th of July, ran an
Attack
anti-Republican
ads in
attack ads in Florida.
That's funny.
And it was just run under, Gavin Newsom for governor. But
Which is weird. Like,
it is. I don't think I've heard of that. I don't think I've seen that ever, where an ad or something like that comes up.
could you imagine if we were sitting here, like here in Utah where we both live, and you get like Governor Cox, like paid for by like, I don't know, the
Andrew Cuomo for
the,
governor.
the senator from like Missouri or
Yeah.
something. You're like, that's kind of weird.
That's random.
Because they're at the point where they can announce that they're going to run for president, right? Can't you officially announce?
So you can announce whenever.
Yeah.
Most people wait until the year of the elections.
Okay.
Or, 2023. So
Yeah.
the year before. But yeah, I mean, anyone could announce. No one big has announced yet.
It
but
seems like you might want to, if you're going to start running attack ad. Because to be honest, I think I would go, like, if I got to the end of an ad and it said paid for by Gavin Newsom for governor of California, I'd go, weird.
even if you're like a Democrat, I'm like, oh,
That's
odd.
not what I was expecting. Because who is it in Florida that might challenge, like a Democrat that might challenge? Do you know any?
For governor?
Yeah.
Oh, the guy running for governor as a Democrat was a former Republican governor for Florida.
Really?
Yeah, he was a former Republican. Now he's a
So,
Democrat.
like-
What is his name?
Well, and it's weird. You'd think you'd have some coordination. Like, let's just like run it, because it's not like there's any kind of really. You could just peg the dude that's gonna run against him in in at the end and go, I'm da-da-da, and I approve this message. It's weird to have it branded to Gavin Newsom.
Right. Dude, I just found something weird from NPR.
What?
I didn't know this. This was from last month. Florida's former Democratic rising star Andrew Gillum, who ran against DeSantis, was indicted by the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear about this.
You hadn't seen that? Yeah.
No.
I don't think we were doing the podcast. It was some weird, like,
A conspiracy to commit wire fraud. It seems like that's where they get a lot of those
a
guys
lot of
is wire
politicians.
fraud.
And it's got to be something with, like, you're taking in so much money from campaign donations, and then there's like, you're like, oh, well, I can buy a car for like my top aide or stuff, and it's like, oh no, you can't do that. It's like wire fraud.
Right.
But not like justifying. I saw the reaction to that, and it's like, of course, like they only go after like the Democrats on stuff like that. It's like, that's not true.
Well, not only is that not true, but I mean, Trump it's pretty, I think it's like
They're
getting
considering
pretty close to him getting indicted by
charges.
Georgia, which would be crazy.
So it's
by
like-
the way.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird one. That reaction, I remember, and I don't think we were doing the podcast at the time, so I didn't say anything, but I saw people being like, oh my gosh, like it's so one-sided, like why would they not? It's like, isn't it like Biden's DOJ?
Yeah, and didn't they get like Nixon on all that?
Well,
Or Nixon's friends and
well,
all
and,
that
like,
on that?
Trump, right? Like Stone, Giuliani, like all these people associated with Trump.
Oh, good point. Stone, Giuliani. There was a bunch of people associated with the Trump campaign that they got.
Yeah.
General Flynn lying to the FBI, they got him on that. Like,
so it's like, I don't know. I think that's a weird one to just automatically go, they never do that. And that's a little bit back to the whole like kind of totally polarized, like no middle ground.
well, it's just sad because you would think that people would realize, especially for how much people dislike politicians, you would think, oh, wow, this is really good. Like they are going after corruption.
That
and
seems
they're
like
treating
something
them
we should agree on, right?
Right.
It's like if politicians break laws, we should go after them. Like it should be the most bipartisan issue in all of politics. So yeah, no, that's a weird one for sure.
Do you remember the Jussie Smollett stuff? I don't know if we ever talked about what ended up happening.
I think we
then.
talked about it.
So anyways, he essentially was going to get off with no prison time after the jury verdict.
Yeah.
And he appealed the decision and the judge gave him jail time, the appellate court. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that weird to think about, that you can get a conviction that you want to overturn, but the higher courts can say, not only did you do it, but you shouldn't have shown us because now you're going to jail.
Well, and that one's bad because that was like a 100% the judge, like in the original case, and like jury being like I don't know. I think because it was proven that he lied about it.
Yeah,
that it wasn't
he was
real.
convicted.
So it's like, what do you do? Like, what's the appeal gonna do? Because we have like blatant proof that you faked this whole thing. What like is the appeal going to be like? Oh, you know what? That like stone cold evidence they have there. I don't know. That doesn't mean as much. Like the text you sent to the guys that put on the charade doesn't mean as much anymore. We're gonna let you off.
It's weird, and yeah, I don't quite understand it.
And it's not like it matters because did he get charged with a felony?
I think so. Yeah,
okay.
I think so.
I guess that matters a little. I was just gonna say like, if it was only a misdemeanor, like okay, like it's not like regardless of the outcome of that case, like he was ever gonna really like act again. Like people were gonna take him on to act again. So it's like, I don't know. And so that was a weird one.
I wanted to get, this is pretty big news, and the alarmists are going crazy with this one. But the Supreme Court is agreeing to hear a case, and it's a really, really big case because essentially what this case says is they want to give state legislatures more oversight, more control power over the electoral process within their state. So what this essentially means is, from the gist of this overly complicated, and I'm going to dumb it down a whole lot, but essentially these state legislatures would be able to decide, if a bunch of votes came in, to accept the votes or deny the votes based on state laws that they could pass. And so the case coming before the Supreme Court, people are saying, if this gets overturned, we're no longer going to have democratic elections. And I think that's a little bit alarmist, but I guess I do have a lot of concerns over this idea of allowing the states essentially all of the control, or allowing state legislatures all of the control, because essentially what it would do is it would take the power from the governor and the Secretary of State and the state courts, which have been deciding all of this stuff as far as disputes regarding votes or elections. It's most of the time gone to the state courts. But what this would do is it would essentially say, okay, those disputes can be handled prior to an election by a state legislature, who can then, after the election is done, they're going to be given all this more power and control over the electoral process. So I wanted to get your take on that.
It'll be interesting to see what their decision is, because, and it'll be interesting. I think there's a magnifying glass on the Supreme Court right now. Every decision that comes through there is getting just scrutinized by everybody for any potential way it could affect stuff. I wonder how many cases that, like, if we were scrutinizing them this closely, the Supreme Court decides a year that people just, like, don't notice. Because I can't imagine, like, we've had, what, like 4 cases that people have been freaking out about in the last week? Did the Supreme Court just, like, go, you know what, we're going to schedule every controversial case we have, every case that could potentially make, like, a huge difference in 1 week? Or are there huge cases like this that kind of go under the rug because nothing happens?
Yeah.
Like, all the time. So it'll be interesting to see.
It seems like there are a lot of cases like that, these big cases that just don't have a lot of publicity. But it seems like with those cases, most of the time the decisions are, if not unanimous, like a big majority. So I think that's when people start scrutinizing stuff a little bit more, is when a case is, even if it goes unpublicized or it's not like a big deal, as soon as there's a really split court on it, there's a magnifying glass put on it. Whereas if it's a unanimous decision, I don't think it gets that much attention because the Supreme Court is just saying, well, this is how it is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see. Those ones are weird. Like, election law stuff like that is weird to me because it's like, because it's not like federal elections, right? They would do stuff. It's state elections.
Yeah,
I mean, changes.
Well, no, it would be presidential elections.
Elections.
Yeah, there's no such thing as like a federal election, but
I mean, right? Like for federal office, right? Like that's an election.
What do you mean?
Like, I mean, there's like president is a federal position. Like senator, like representative is like.
Oh, I see what you mean.
In the federal government.
But this decision would apply to those.
That?
Yes.
Okay. Well, yeah. No, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see because it's kind of the gerrymandering thing where it's like everyone does it and like both sides complain about it. So it's like, so why don't we just fix it? And then both sides are like, well, only fix it in those cases where it's not helping me. And so it's like, what happens? Yeah. I don't know.
Gerrymandering's such a weird one too, because if everyone just got together and said, this is wrong, like this is wrong for both sides, we can agree gerrymandering is wrong, right? You have to split up districts in a way that makes sense and you have to split them up. But I think both sides would agree gerrymandering in its objective is wrong. You were trying to lessen the impact of whether it's a racial group, minority group, political group, you're trying to lessen the impact of their vote, which I think is wrong. But it's just a tricky situation because both sides have, I mean, even the most liberal states are freaking gerrymandered to crap.
Yeah,
Some of these districts are insane.
If you look at any district, I mean, I think there's one state maybe, or 1 or 2 states that have just like the block, like we just sliced it.
Yeah.
But it's like, so how does it work? Because if we go, how do you divide it up? Like, do we just cut through the most through the middle of the most populated city, or do you? Because it'd be interesting to see how stuff would get redistricted. But
yeah.
No, that gerrymandering is a weird one that I've always been like, everyone points the finger and is like, hey, we need to change this, but only where it helps us. Like, we can't, like, let us gerrymander, but don't let them.
So another quick thing, Liz Cheney is refusing to rule out running for president. I don't think it'd be the most successful campaign because she's lost the very Trump right-wing side of the Republican Party, which it's like, okay, she's kind of got a Mitt Romney thing going on for her. She could, there's still a pretty big part of the Republican Party that could get behind her. But she's also lost like the kind of more liberal Republicans or, these anti-war, anti-establishment Republicans, because she's just kind of the epitome of establishment. I mean, she's
like, she doesn't have the libertarian right.
No.
But she also doesn't have like the authoritarian right.
Yeah, and she doesn't even really have like the establishment right.
She has this weird little like, we hate Trump, but we also don't want high taxes
Yeah, it's really
group
unusual.
that's I don't think is as big as you would think from how much coverage she gets on like CNN and stuff.
Right. And
Yeah.
liberals don't like her. So that's the thing is it's like you can't really run with like hoping to get the Democrats to vote for you because
they're going to vote for the Democrat.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the Republicans to vote for you. And I bet you get like a bunch of people that just don't vote even if she won the primary.
Who else? Nikki Haley could be running for president if you remember her. She former governor and UN ambassador. I actually really like her. I don't really like her politics, but I really like her as a personality. I'm trying to think who else. I think that's about it.
So we're probably next year we start getting people starting campaigns. Right?
Oh, next year I think
Or for
stuff
sure
starts
we
to
get
ramp
people,
up.
but
Yeah.
that'll be it'll be interesting. It's always funny like right at the start when you get like this super broad field of people that are running and you're like, why do you think you have a chance at like being president?
It's
like
weird.
what? Yeah, it'll be weird. And this is a weird one too because you're gonna get like it's not gonna be like in 2020 where Trump like unchallenged was like I don't think Biden's gonna run again.
No,
And
I don't think so.
we're gonna get like
And if he does, I mean, Trump wins. I mean, they have to know this, right?
yeah.
They have to know that a Biden or even DeSantis, if it's DeSantis, I think DeSantis is going to sweep the floor with Biden. Like he's going to
Reagan,
win pretty much every swing
like
state.
Reagan.
Yeah, he's just really DeSantis is really popular and he's charismatic and he's just kind of, I don't know. I can't really describe it. I'm not a big fan of his politics, but as a politician, he's very put together. He seems to know what he's saying and he's very, what's the right word? Controlled in he's like Trump without the bad stuff, right? So if you like Trump, if you like Trump's politics, you like DeSantis' politics.
Have you seen any of his Disney stuff where he's like mad at Disney?
Oh yeah. It was a big
That
thing.
stuff's a little unhinged.
That stuff is a little bit unhinged, and there's actually a lot of stuff he's done that's really unhinged.
Very unhinged.
But that's how Trump is, right? He's
true.
like Trump's policies without the,
Without the tweeting.
name calling, tweeting,
Yeah.
just kind of weird stuff. One last thing before we wrap this one
Okay.
up. So in the January 6th committee, there was a woman who came before the committee. It was like a surprise witness. She basically said that during January 6th, the Secret Service refused to take Trump to the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
A Secret Service agent did, and Trump reached in front and tried to grab him and take control of the wheel. And there was an altercation between Trump and the Secret Service agent that was witnessed by this lady. And I don't know if you saw any of the messages that Trump sent on Truth Social.
No.
It was unhinged. Dude.
Really?
He was going bonkers.
I heard that lady, and wasn't there like, maybe I'm wrong, but didn't like the head of Trump's security detail, wasn't the head of Trump's security detail like, I want to testify and say this was not true?
So you're close. Basically, that may have happened, but the Secret Service came out and issued a public statement saying we weren't invited to give our side of the story, whether it was asked to be called into committee or provide a written explanation.
Which is weird.
And they said they would. They said, we're still waiting to be invited.
That's a weird one, right?
Yes, it is weird.
Don't you think?
It is weird.
Like, okay, how many people ride in a car with the president? Especially in a situation like that. It's got to be like 6.
Well, yeah, and it's all not public record, but it's all recorded, right? So they could find, if they requested information from the Secret Service as it relates to who was in Trump's car the day of January 6th, it would be provided, and they could choose to bring that person forward to testify. And the Secret Service is saying, we'll send them. We'll send anyone you want. Yeah. Which is like, there's a reason that they're not calling forth the Secret Service statements.
So now, and this is a weird one. Like the committee is weird because it's not like a court case where you get like, there's a defendant. Like Trump's not there to be like, okay, I'm going to call a rebuttal witness.
Right.
Like the Secret Service that can go, this absolutely did not happen, or whatever they're going to say.
And I think it would be unusual because I can't remember the last time the Secret Service was called to testify in regards to like a presidential detail they were doing, because they can't, I don't think they can testify about 99.9% of the things that occur while they're with the president.
But it does feel weird that you wouldn't, for the Secret Service to come out and be like,
that's the weird
hey,
piece.
ask us. No, ask us. Bring us forward and ask us.
That's the weird part.
That feels very much like, hey, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
What she said is not true, and we want to like put that to rest.
Right.
And then for you to go, no, be quiet, Secret Service. Like, stay over there. We don't want you. Because if what she said is true, you should be able to bring in 5 Secret Service agents that are in the car with Trump and a driver that go, yeah, this is what happened.
And they'll be under oath, right?
They're under oath, which is a bad look for, like, I don't, did they feel like I feel like the January 6th stuff was like going well enough for them that they didn't need to bring in some ringer that gave.
Well, the things that me and you were talking about with the Secret Service isn't being talked about on Fox News because they're too busy talking about, like, I don't know, anti-trans stuff, whatever narrative they're pushing on Fox News. But the right-wing media and people aren't coming out and saying the things that we're saying. They're not saying, why isn't the Secret Service, why don't you call forth the Secret Service?
The correct right-wing media.
I know. I don't want to make
it did kind of sound like that, so I just wanted to give that, like,
right.
We're not right-wing media 2.0.
But you were asking essentially, why is that not being talked about as much as we're talking about it? And it's because, you know, they're sitting here,
Focused
they're so busy focused
stuff.
on weird, just completely nonsensical narratives instead of talking about, hey, why you have the Secret Service and you're refusing to call them forward?
Because, I mean, right? Like, we know with Nixon, everything the president does is recorded.
Yeah.
So why? I'm sure they have cameras and microphones in the cars.
Guaranteed.
I'm sure. I mean, there's got to be cameras. Like 100%, just at the very least for security reasons. So why? Yeah, I just don't get it. And it's like a weird, it's so weird because what's the point? I mean, even from the committee's perspective, to bring in this witness that is just going to say, because the people that are on your side don't need that witness to basically just say, hey, Trump's like crazy. And then the people that aren't on your side, I don't think that's going to convince them. They probably like that. They probably wanted Trump to go to the Capitol and are glad he's like fighting for him or whatever.
Well, and it just kind of, it kills their overall narrative that, hey, we're trying to get to the bottom of the truth here. We just want to find out the truth behind what happened on January 6th.
It's a little like the Russia probe.
Right.
Where all of a sudden it comes out, oh yeah, there was no contact. Like we found no like indication of collusion with Russia. And it's like, wait, but why? Like that's such a big deal. I mean, like Trump got impeached for Russia, basically. Well, he got impeached for not cooperating with the Russia investigation that turned up absolutely nothing. And so it's just, I don't know. I thought that was weird, and it'll be interesting if they ever do get the Secret Service. Because because that just, to me, like on face value, hey, we have 6 witnesses, but we're only going to call the one, even though the other 5 really want to testify.
Yeah.
We'll only call the one. So
it is weird. It's one-sided for sure. All right, should we wrap up?
Let's call this one.
This is CTS Podcast, episode 60.